this morning. We're talking to 14th District State Representative Mr. Chris Corry. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Dave and Lance. How are you both?
We are, well, speaking for me, fantastic. Speaking for Lance, pretty good.
Pretty good, pretty good.
How about yourself, sir?
Well, I'm a little disappointed I'm not in person with you guys this morning, but I've got a cup of coffee in my hand, and my kids are still asleep, so it's a good morning so far.
Tell you what, you sound better than candidate Tom Dent did yesterday. I don't know if you know that your 13th District fellow has COVID, so you are miles ahead of all of that.
Yeah, that's right.
So let's start with that.
I did. I talked to him yesterday. We were really sad to hear that, but Tom Dent is like the Chuck Norris of the Washington House, so that the COVID should be afraid is really what I'm saying.
Just saying, Chris, so just to start us out, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little about yourself. You got a family and kind of why you're running.
I do.
Yeah.
So I'm currently serving in my first term. I am married to my amazing wife, Jenica, who was born and raised here in the Yakima Valley. We came home, as it were, about 8 years ago, and I have 3 children. I have a 9, 7, and 3-year-old. My wife and I are active foster parents. We actually just had one of our long-term kids move out to her forever home, so we're excited for her last week. She actually came into care on election night almost 2 years ago in November. It was quite an experience for her. We were like, welcome to the family. Time to go meet a bunch of people you don't know.
Really?
We're a busy family. My job, I'm an insurance broker here in the Valley, in addition to being a legislator because we are part-time. So it's a busy life, but we are very happy, and it's very humbling to be able to serve the 14th District in Olympia. And I'm hoping to get another 2 years to do that in November.
And the family has been COVID-free.
COVID-free. We've been doing our part, social distancing, wearing masks, all that stuff. But we're happy and healthy.
Well, let's start there about COVID. How do you think the state has handled this whole COVID thing? I mean, I guess we kind of know how you feel, given the fact that you were part of a lawsuit earlier this year. But tell us kind of how you feel that the state has handled this.
Yeah, so, it was one thing when we started out, we were all pretty much together and on board. We didn't really know what to expect. We didn't want to overwhelm our hospitals. We wanted to make sure we had the appropriate equipment for our first responders. But as the months went on, it was clear that the legislature, were being pushed out, and local decision makers, county government, health authorities were kind of being pushed out for a more statewide approach. I'm a big believer, obviously, in public health, but I'm an even bigger believer in our constitutional rights. And, we have laws in place to handle pandemics and outbreaks, and I think those laws should be followed. So I question that decision. I mean, I'm happy to see we're in phase 2. I am getting kind of tired of picking winners and losers. I think that we've seen here in the Yakima Valley that people are willing to do the right things to keep themselves safe, and we should be able to trust businesses and individuals to make the right decisions on their behalf and the behalf of their employees, their customers, their families. So that's kind of where I'm at now. So I'm going to continue to push for getting businesses safely reopened. I spent my office essentially turned into a field office for the Employment Securities Department. We spent months just trying to get people their unemployment that they were due, that the state was either had them in hold or were denying due to a variety of issues. But I had people go almost 3 months without a paycheck. And I can't imagine living under that type of stress. So, again, I'm going to keep fighting for my district and fighting to make sure that, we don't have more unnecessary business closures and that we can get people back to work safely, of course.
Chris, Hold 1 second, please. Sorry about that, Chris. Little inside baseball.
Everything okay?
Oh yeah. No, just a technical thing here. I wasn't able to hear you as well as I would like, and Lord knows I hang on your every word. You know that, Chris.
Well, I thought I was the politician. Wow.
No, sir. That's the nice thing about you. You're not a politician. I don't consider you a politician. I consider you one of the very nice guys in our community who's interested in making our community a better place and is taking an opportunity to do that. And that's as good a compliment as I can pay, because that's what I think it should be.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. You're just a good guy.
Yeah. Well, so, when I ran 2 years ago, it was really under the idea of, I'm on the younger side of the legislature.
Sure.
I didn't see a lot of people, in my age bracket in our situation, right? Family, figuring out how to make everything work, pay the bills, buying the house, stuff like that. And unfortunately, with a part-time legislature, it's hard for a lot of people to be able to drop what they're doing for 4 months and go to Olympia, especially in kind of my age range. And so, fortunately, I've got a job that was very flexible with that. And I also, more importantly, had a wife and a family support structure here that allowed me to do that. Because I've told this story very publicly. My wife has the ultimate veto authority on me being in the legislature, because for me, family comes first.
Don't let your opponent know that, or they'll try to buy off the wife instead of beating you at the ballot box.
Fair enough. But, I've always said if my wife decides that it's too much for her with me being gone, I wouldn't run again. And I truly mean that, because I have one shot at raising my kids and being a good husband, and I fully intend on doing that more than anything else.
Right on, sir. Well said. Well, let's talk about that lawsuit just briefly. What was that experience like? We're basically having to sue our governor over overreach and assuming powers either that he didn't have or claiming them longer. What was the exact nature of the suit that you were involved in?
So the fundamental premise is I mentioned it earlier, but we have RCWs in statute that determine pandemic response. And so that authority is given to county health districts to work in cooperation with the Department of Health to handle pandemics. And what we saw was kind of a closed-door Olympia-centered approach that really didn't, understand local needs and allow local authorities to make decisions for themselves. And while I supported and agreed with the initial emergency order and the stay home, stay healthy order, after 2 months of there really being a lot of what we thought were questionable decisions made,
sure,
that we really thought it was time to, follow the law outside of that emergency. The emergency powers are really, they're designed around very limited in scope things. And obviously a pandemic's going to last a while. It's still a crisis, but an emergency is emergent. It's something new. It's something unknown. And, it gives you time to get your ducks in a row. And then when you get your local, authorities and resources aligned and running, that's really where it should be turned back to. And I'll give you the biggest example that was probably, for me, one of the most frustrating parts was who got to continue working, who was essential versus who was not. So if you were working on a public construction project, you were essential. You could keep working. But if you were working on like private construction, like a home, apartments, you were not essential and couldn't keep working. And to me, that was frustrating because, why is one group of construction safe, but the other one not? And so it was just examples like that really made us question whether or not, that should continue on. And we really didn't think it should. So
it goes to court. Let me truncate this a little bit. So it goes to court. You guys take it to court. Does the court take it up? Did the court rule on it? Remind us of what happened.
So they actually dismissed it because the Attorney General's office came in and argued on behalf of the governor that said, well, I actually have no authority to enforce these laws. That's other agencies. So you can't really, you're basically suing the wrong person. So they dismissed it saying, well, I can't enforce these. And it was an interesting take for us. We did not think it was appropriate to go out and say, oh, he says he has no authority, go do what you want, because we have still seen, especially in this valley, labor and industries come out and be very punitive on businesses for not filing or following every, decision the governor's office has made. So there are additional business challenges out there, and we're watching them to see what comes of it. I know you probably have seen there's initiative 1114, I believe it is, that will put a true cap and limit on emergency authority,
right?
So that we just don't live under an emergency order indefinitely.
So basically, the governor is hiding out in the alleyways between agencies, right? Kind of like going from alleyway to alleyway. You can't get me. I'm not the guy, but these agencies all are.
Well, you've seen the fines being levied on businesses across the state.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's out there.
No regrets. You'd do it again, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you, Chris? You guys had filed that.
I think so. Yeah, I think it was the right thing to do. I mean, reasonable minds can disagree on the decision, and I had people on both sides of the aisle, both sides of the issue, I should say, that were either for what I was doing or were against it. And I made it a point, just like I do in my legislative matters, to talk to both sides. So anytime somebody was upset with what I did, typically I was getting a lot of emails on it. And anybody who was upset about it, I gave them my phone number and said I would be more than willing to talk to you about this one-on-one, and I gave them my direct cell phone number. And I was very happy. A lot of people took me up on that, and we could have a conversation. And so, there was my explaining my point, listening to what other people had to say, and, understanding people had fears of what was going on. And obviously, we have to balance, making sure we protect people and the public health with protecting people's rights and ensuring that, we keep our economy moving safely.
Well, as a risk management guy, what do you see the risk to, is that even a fair question, a risk to our government and our budget by where we're at right now? You'll be a couple of months away from heading back to Olympia. I know that you were in favor, I believe you were in favor of a special session to get ahead of things, weren't you?
Yes, and I still am, even though we only have a limited time left before there. So there's good news here. Our budget deficits are not nearly as bad as they were projected originally. So we're down to only, I say that laughing a little bit, only $4 billion, which is still obviously a lot of money. But if you dig into the numbers, what you're going to find is that we've had out of control spending the last 2 years. And I can back that up by saying if you go look at our state revenues from 2 years ago in our 17-19 biennium, we're actually taking in more money still now. So we're not in a Great Recession 08-09 budget where revenues have fallen off a cliff. They're down, but a lot of our budget deficit problems are because of new spending that we've done in the last 2 years.
Which could be addressed by the special session, theoretically, right?
Yes, we can right-size the ship while making sure that we protect vital public services. I don't think there's a need for draconian cuts. There's definitely not a need for new taxes. That's the last thing we want to do now for businesses who've been shut down and struggling. So there's no need for new revenue. You're going to hear, I think once we get back into session, you'll hear a lot of sky is falling, and people are going to want to use this to raise taxes. But I think we can right-size our budget without raising taxes. And again, remembering that we really, we're not in a Great Recession-style deficit. It was basically all new monies from the amazing economy we had up until COVID. So there's lots of work to do. But again, I don't think it's going to be nearly as dramatic as it's going to sound.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's going to sound. They're going to make a pitch that that we will need new taxes because nobody wants to turn their back.
Democrats,
Go ahead.
Yeah, the Democrats have been saying that they want income tax, they want a variety of additional taxes that they've been openly talking about, and they're saying none of it's off the table, which is important. That one of the challenges we're going to have is that they're calling for a fully remote session, and I believe that is a disservice to my constituents. We talk a lot about access to democracy. If you've got 98 legislators sitting from their homes working, that's not going to serve the people of the state. It's certainly not going to serve my constituents. So we're fighting to make sure that next session we're back in person safely, with appropriate measures taken to keep the chamber, keep the members, keep staff safe.
That will be interesting. Will those kinds of decisions have to be reached prior to everybody going over there and being in session? Otherwise, you sort of like go over, decide, and then go home. I mean, will we know come January what the lay of the land's going to be as far as that goes?
Yes, we'll know, because what's going to happen is any remote session style proceedings are going to have to be changed in our rules, which requires a vote in person. So, those negotiations are going on right now.
Chris, we got to take a break for news. Please stay with us. We'd like to talk to you after the break at the bottom of the hour. News Talk 1280 KIT. Some clouds out there waiting for us. As Liza said, the weather is changing, heading into fall, deep into fall.
Man,
Had a nice early fall, but now we're deep undercover, as they say. It's time to resume our conversation with 14th District Representative Chris Corry. Chris, thanks for your patience. Appreciate it.
No worries.
Where else are you going to go, right? It's COVID.
Chris,
I should have gotten another cup of coffee, but that's okay.
We were talking a little bit about the state budget before we left, and boy, there's been a lot of talk about new taxes, and we understand that you're probably not in favor of new taxes, but we're hurting in this state, right? How do we find the money to fill the coffers?
So I think that the way we find the money to fill the coffers is the same way a family would find the money to meet their expenses. They would adjust down their spending. And I don't mean to argue that the budget is that simple, but the idea is, we have asked families and businesses to tighten their belts and to sacrifice during this pandemic, and I see no reason why the government shouldn't do the same exact thing. Again, based on where we were spending 2 years ago, we can go back to that level of spending and meet all our obligations and be okay without any new taxes on the people of the state of Washington.
So technically,
there are some. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say, so technically, we aren't hurting. That's the message that they want to send, that we're somehow hurting, and yet we're taking in more money. We're just overspending. So, in your opinion, does that constitute the state is hurting, yes or no?
I think the state has overextended itself. There's others that will claim that, if we cut any spending, we're going to be hurting people, and I don't believe that's the case. I think that we can right size the budget while still protecting vital services and programs. So there's a lot of nuance to it, right? And there's a lot we're going to have to dig into. And I sit on the Appropriations Committee, and that's one of the things we're going to be tasked with. But I don't think the solution is just saying, well, we're going to raise taxes and make the difference up. It's really not fair to the families and businesses of our state.
How delicate do you have to be with all of this? I mean, it is what it is. We're taking in more money. We've taken a COVID hit, and we're taking in less than we had hoped, but we're still taking in more money. Come on, people, we've got a trip. Can you speak with that sort of frankness to the other side, or do you have to tap dance around?
No, I think we can be upfront and honest with people and letting them know where we're at. One of the things that I've made a significant effort in my first term is making sure that I have relationships with people on the other side of the aisle so that I can advocate for Central Washington and, my conservative principles. I think that that's important. So you can be honest with them, But you have to, you have to get to know them. You have to be, you have to have good working relationships with them. And I think that's important, and that's something that I've really focused on. My freshman year, the most impactful piece of legislation I got passed was helping substance abuse peer counselors, and that I was number 2 on that bill with a freshman Democrat from Seattle. And we probably agree on, very little things, but this was something where this was important to the state. It's not a Republican or Democrat issue, and we worked together. So having those relationships allows you to be honest and frank with what's going on, and hopefully, woo them to the side of some, fiscal discipline.
We have seen record returns already in Seattle and at our county courthouse. As someone who's going to rely on some of those returns to send you back, what do you make of the current just political climate that has so many people wanting to make sure they're on board? What is that? How do you read that?
Wow. So that's a great question. I think that what you're seeing is the result of just 24/7 nonstop media, particularly about our presidential election. And while those are important, and I never discount them, and obviously I believe that everyone should be voting, and be an informed voter. I wish there was more attention paid to the state and local races, because those are actually the true impact on our day-to-day lives. The media doesn't cover that obviously as much because it's not nearly as eye-catching as the presidential election, but a lot of the decisions we make affect your day-to-day lives. So I'm hopeful that people, as they're casting their ballots and turnout is up, that they're getting to learn more about their county commissioners, their local judges, their state legislators, because we really do have a great impact on the lives, just the day-to-day working lives of families and businesses.
We certainly have seen that through this COVID situation. One of the conversations that we had with Tom Dent was about wildfires. That's kind of his bailiwick. It might not be where you sit, but certainly we've seen the impact on fires around here. We've seen it in air quality, quality of life, and in the places we like to go, in what areas where we like to recreate. The Commissioner of Public Lands has said that we've made progress, but there is so much more to do. Do you have any thoughts on that area, or what the legislature might do to try to take further steps to see that we are a little better prepared in our forest maintenance, or is that an area that is not in your wheelhouse?
Oh, it's absolutely in my wheelhouse. My district covers Klickitat and Skamania County as well, and we have, a lot of state and federal forest land in those counties. And you want to talk about, there's 2 impacts. Obviously, we'll talk about the environmental impact. Years of federal and state mismanagement has left large dry fuel loads sitting in our forests, and we are not logging and managing them to the degree we need to. And that's not just on the state, that's also, issues we've had on the federal land. And what we found is, obviously, with our hotter summers and our drier summers, this kindling is just ripe for explosion. So when you have these fires, because you haven't maintained them, you haven't done logging and thinning and replanting, you create these large, massive forest fires, which put so much carbon up into our air. And I know we're concerned about carbon output. If you log it and you replant it and you thin it and you keep it in good health, you're going to actually reduce your carbon output from, instead of having one large fire. So that's an important thing. We need to keep logging. We need to do it safely. There's
a revenue impact there too, right? We make money from logs.
Yes, we absolutely do. And what's interesting is Skamania County is now the poorest county in the state of Washington. It used to be the richest because of the logging industry, and now it's the poorest because 80% of their land is held by the feds and the state government. And so they rely on PILT, which is payment in lieu of taxes, from the government. They are literally subject to the mercies of government handouts based on how much is supposed to be logged and what's supposed to go into those trusts. And if you look at the science, because we want to follow science, Science shows if you properly thin and log your forests and replant, you can actually have a greater net reduction to carbon than just leaving the forest there. Because trees, as they grow and they develop, actually sequester more carbon than the older trees that are just sitting there. And you have to remember that when you've sequestered that carbon in a tree and you log it and you build a house or you build whatever, that carbon is sequestered permanently.
Yep.
And so, we don't, for me, it's similar to oil, right? I don't want to be reliant on foreign timber. There's no reason why we should. We can do it safely. They can provide good jobs. It's good revenue for the state. The state actually makes money off this with lands that we hold, and that, can offset needs for revenues elsewhere.
Chris, our lands commissioner was over here and saying that she was supportive of cleaning up the forest. Do you think that's something that she's just saying over here? Or do you believe...
No, she has been very clear about that.
Yeah.
She's been very clear about that in Olympia. We probably would disagree on the amount, but she is focused on some very important issues. I think that the initial attacks and making sure that we have the equipment mobilized and staged, so when a fire does start, you can do the initial attack that can lower the spread. But we do need to be doing more managing, and unfortunately, you have a lot of people on the west side who just view that as if you're just, going and destroying the entire forest, which is not what's happening. So you have a lot of money being spent to harm us because they think they're doing a good thing on the west side. I mean, it's similar to the wolves issue, right? It's like, well, let's just keep the wolves going on eastern Washington because it makes me feel good. Well, you're not considering the impact of that to our local economies and our local safety on the east side.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to wax philosophic when you don't have to live with the results. So,
well, yeah, we did offer a bill in 2019 to move some of the wolves into Bainbridge Island.
Yeah.
So that the west side could do their part with wolf population. And you guys can imagine how far that bill went.
I'm thinking a couple of cats and dogs turn out missing. The cry will be louder than when you lose 3-4 head of cattle. But let's take a sidestep here to the area of education. Education has dominated the legislature the last few years as the McCleary decision worked its way through our court and finally into implementation. With COVID now and schools not really doing their normal thing, will we see much activity around education, do you think, legislatively? Are we just all hoping to get back to some kind of normal? Or where do you think that's going to go?
I think it can go in one of two ways. There's calls right now to keep funding the exact same as it was, and I'm not sure that's the right approach. It really depends on what has happened as far as kids moving out of our schools into other forms of education, whether it's homeschool, private school.
Yeah, we're seeing that, aren't we? By the hundreds.
Yeah. Yes, and actually, the OSBI is collecting that data right now. They're estimating it's around 3%, and then when you got to drill down in is how much of that is just kindergartners who are waiting a year to come in, additional year, instead of going in at 5, they're going to go in at 6, versus people who've pulled out and moved to private schools or homeschool. So, there's obviously there's different challenges and expenses school districts are facing, and we want to be cognizant of that. But I think the important focus for us with schools is getting kids back in person safely and protecting teachers and staff.
Well, and I don't know there's not a whole lot that you folks at your end can do that. I mean, that's basically protocols locally, isn't it?
Yeah, so most of that is local decision-making in cooperation with the local health authority. But, one of the challenges is that we'll see is, that we may have to, as a state, respond to is, if there's PPE needs that that are necessary,
right?
Making sure that the districts have access to those. So we'll see. I don't think it will be the biggest focus of funding discussions, especially given, what we've already done to provide historic investments in our schools. K-12 education takes up 52% of our budget.
Yeah, that's that much bigger budget. Well, Chris, let me ask you this: as a guy who's got his eye on the prize for Eastern Washington, is there something out there that you would like to see taken up by the legislature that you know will just won't get there? I mean, what's the big hole in our region that needs legislative attention that probably won't see it? Is there anything out there that you're concerned about in that regard?
Yeah, there's a couple areas. I'll try to be brief. One, the big area, especially in light of COVID, I started really doing deep dives into health insurance in our state and what it means for health providers to be in our counties. And we're finally seeing an uptick in healthcare providers that are actually going to be here locally. A couple of years ago, prior to me being in the legislature, initially Clickatack County had none that were going to be available through the exchange, and the legislature was able to get a couple in there, but now we're up to, I want to say, 8 different plans. I don't believe that socialized medicine is the way to go. I think that health insurance, private health insurance, is actually what supports the Medicaid and Medicare. And if you get rid of that, you're going to see huge problems throughout our healthcare industry. And I talked to a lot of administrators about that as far as funding and financing goes. What I would like to see, that I'm not sure we're going to get to, is better options for group plans to be able to form, whether it's an association that puts together a health plan for their, all their different members. For example,
Sure.
I was on the phone yesterday with the Washington Child Care Association, and this is made up of about 2,700 different independent child care providers. Those smaller child care providers, it is impossible to get the number of people in a good group plan to make the costs work out for the provider. But if you take 2,700 of those with their vast, amount of employees, you can actually get a good risk pool together. But you can't do that in our state right now.
Right.
And my question is why?
So I'm gonna head you off at the pass there, because that's a very good question worth pondering as the legislature moves ahead in subsequent years. We've got about 45 seconds for you to give us the old, hey, this is Chris Corry, and here's why you should vote for me. So if you'd want to play your best card, go for it.
All right. Well, first of all, I appreciate your guys' time today. When I ran in 2018, it was to represent the people and businesses in Central Washington. I've worked hard to do that with everyone in my district, working from here in Yakima down into the Gorge. I've stood up for parental rights and their decision-making for their children. I've fought for farmers and ranchers against DNR overreach and early termination leases, and actually had great success there. I've worked to make sure that people understand, especially on the west side, what we do here and the value that we as a rural agriculture economy bring to the state, and make sure that we limit overburdensome regulations that hurt us here locally. So I would obviously humbly ask for your vote to continue working on that, and I appreciate your time this morning.